know you're struggling. The hour is 7 p.m. Having arrived, I'll call to order this regular meeting of Keene City Council. This meeting is televised live on Channel 1302. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted to the city website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. If you'd like to receive an electronic copy of the City Council packet to reference while viewing future broadcasts, please contact the City Clerk's office during business hours or go to the city's website and subscribe to the city's email list. The agenda is also accessible from any mobile device. I would ask that the clerk please call the roll.
Brian J. Lake.
Here.
Michael J. Remy.
Here.
Gladys Johnson.
Here.
Michael Giacomo.
Here.
Randy L. Filio.
Here.
Robert C. Williams.
Here.
Philip M. Jones.
Here.
Andrew M. Madison.
Here.
Chris C. Roberts.
Here.
Raleigh C. Omerod.
Here.
Bettina A. Chadbourne.
Here.
Catherine I. Workman.
Here.
Mitchell H. Greenwald.
Here.
Kate M. Bosley.
Here.
And Thomas F. Powers.
Here.
Thank you very much. Councilor Roberts, would you please lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. Nice to see some of us wearing green, and hope you all had a good St. Patrick's Day today. We have a couple of birthdays this month. Councilor Randy Filio's birthday is on March 5th. Happy birthday.
The good news, Your Honor, is I just turned 33. The bad news is it's the second time. You know?
Second time.
Second time being 33.
And another birthday, Councilor Bettina Chadbourne's birthday is on March 9th. And one more quick announcement. So after today, our city clerk, Patty Little, will be the longest-serving city clerk in Keene's history at 43 years. So that's a pretty significant accomplishment. And with that, I'm looking to Councilor Powers for a motion. Councilor Bosley for a second on the minutes, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to accept the minutes from the March 3rd, 2022 regular meeting as printed.
I second.
We have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Bosley. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Which brings us to nominations, number 1.
This evening, the mayor is nominating, actually, these two members are current members of the planning board, and they're swapping positions. So Gail Summers has been a regular member of the planning board and is seeking to become an alternate. And our new alternate, Armando Rangel, would like to become a regular. So the nomination before you is really just a swap of those two member positions. And in addition, the mayor is nominating a Christopher Ratter to serve as an alternate to the Airport Development and Marketing Committee.
And we will table these to the next regular meeting, number 2.
This evening, the mayor is appointing a new ad hoc committee. It's called the Downtown Infrastructure Project Steering Committee. And our rules do allow the confirmation of these appointments on their first reading. So there'll be a motion after I read the slate of members. This group of individuals will serve on the Ad hoc Downtown Infrastructure Project Steering Committee with a charge to review the scope and design of utility replacements as well as improvements to the downtown area. The ad hoc committee will serve as an advocate for the project and be the host for any public interaction events. Finally, the ad hoc committee will make its recommendations to the council with regards to the project. Mayor Hansel will serve as the chair. Membership includes Councilor Filio, as well as Councilor Greenwald and Councilor Madison, and Dylan Bennick, who represents the Bicycle Pedestrian Path Advisory Committee. The rest of these individuals are members of the public. They include Alex Faulkner, Alec Doyle, Mark Rebellard, Brandy Wells, Nathalie Howder, Cheryl Belair, and Robert Patton Spruill.
And I'm looking to Councilor Powers for a motion. Councilor Bosley for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to confirm the appointment.
I second.
I'm going to motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Bosley. Any discussion on these nominations? Councilor Remy?
Thank you, Your Honor.
told you this earlier, I think there's a couple categories that are missing, but I hope we can find a way to still bring those folks in for the discussion as part of this planning process. Specifically, the largest one being any sit-down restaurants. So that's, hopefully they're still included somehow.
Yeah, the process to nominate people to these special committees is not an easy one, I will tell you. You've got to first figure out all the different areas that you want represented, and then you've got to find the people that have the time in their schedule to do it, and you shift things around. But we're certainly make sure that there's a lot of public input on this project because it's so vitally important to the city. So even if you're not, for anyone watching from home, even if you're not on the committee meetings are open to the public. You can come. We hope that you participate. We really need the public to step up and weigh in because otherwise it's not going to be a successful project. So thanks for the reminder. Let's see. You threw me off there. We didn't even vote yet.
No.
All right. Any other comments? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Which brings us to communications, number 1.
We have a communication on behalf of Machina Kitchen and Art Bar. They are putting forward their request to use city public parking spaces for a parklet, which would be used for an extension of their outdoor dining.
And this will be referred to the Planning Licenses and Development Committee. We'll also be taking up the concept of parklets later in the agenda. I want to get consensus from the council at that point. Number 2.
Communication from Councilor Remy. He's raising a conflict of interest with his position as event chair for the Keene Young Professionals Network. Their food license is further on your agenda for action.
Councilor Remy, do you want to address this request?
So I'm actually not confident if I have a conflict of interest. I wanted to put it up so that you guys are aware of what my role is so that you guys can decide. I agree on a conflict of interest for the request for funds that we did earlier and it's already been gone through. This is for the license to close down Main Street and to do the event itself. I'm not really clear where that stands from a conflict of interest standpoint, given that it's not financial. So.
All right, thank you. I'd be looking at Councilor Powers for a motion. Councilor Mosley for a second, please.
Thank you. I would, thank you, Your Honor. I move to accept the conflict of interest.
Second.
And we have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Mosley. Any discussion before we vote on this?
Just to clarify, that acceptance suggests that there is no conflict. Shall I take it that way?
No, that's not the way I was
Okay,
thinking.
No.
if you could
But
clarify.
Isn't that usual? You think one way and I another.
I understood it to mean that
There
at
isn't.
least putting a motion forward that the conflict exists.
All
So
right.
an affirmative vote from the council would be, he has a conflict, he'll be excused from voting on the matter. A negative or a no vote by the council here means that there is no conflict and he can move ahead.
Thank you.
Councilor Mosley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would just like to also clarify, potentially with our city attorney, we've had a lengthy conversation about conflict of interest, and we've started to cross over into this boards and commissions sort of piece of where this applies and how it applies appropriately. I would make the assumption that your board or commission seat should constitute a conflict when negotiating contracts that are financial with the city and not necessarily at this level. I don't know if that's how the way that we've been interpreting it would be, if that's how you would mean it.
City attorney?
Well, remember, there's the new rules of procedure potentially that are on the agenda later. My Boston accent had changed, will change the existing rule. The existing rule, though, still does include the idea of a fiduciary obligation. So it's not just pecuniary, there's a fiduciary obligation under the existing rule. That was changed by the council a number of years ago. And for all intents and purposes, the best way to understand a fiduciary duty is to say that you have a duty of loyalty to this other entity. So that's part of the question, I think, is it's not just financial, but do members of the council believe that Councilor Remy, in the work that he's doing with this project, puts upon him sort of a duty of loyalty to that project. If you think that, then you may want to find a conflict. If you do not, then you would vote no.
And I'll add on to that, having discussed this in many different capacities, I always saw it, and this is just one person's opinion, but I always interpret it as if the city is on one side of a negotiation and the entity is on the other side of a negotiation, and there's potential for the interests to be different there, then I think that was what I would interpret as a conflict. If you're just going through the procedural process to get something permitted and licensed and there isn't any kind of negotiation being had, I don't see a conflict there, but that's one person's opinion. All right, any further discussion on this? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? One in favor. All those opposed? I think the opposed have it, so Councilor Remy can go on and vote. Okay, number 3.
We have a communication that's actually coming from 3 counselors, so Counselor Williams, Counselor Workman, and Counselor Lake. I have crafted a communication to the council encouraging the city to develop a homelessness strategy through programs that focus on reducing harms associated with homelessness.
And this will be referred to the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee. That brings us to committee reports, number 1.
Planning Licenses and Development Committee report relative to Machina Kitchen and Art Bar's request to serve alcohol in connection with their Sidewalk Cafe license. On a vote of 4-0, the Planning Licenses and Development Committee recommends that Machina Kitchen and Art Bar be granted permission to serve alcoholic beverages in connection with their Sidewalk Cafe license, subject to the customary licensing requirements of the council and compliance with any requirements of Section 461191 through 461196 of the code.
Thank you, and I'm looking at Councilor Bosley for a motion. Councilor Giacomo for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Bosley, seconded by Councilor Giacomo. Councilor Bosley.
Thank you. So the last 2 years, Machina was operating under the emergency order authority for their cafe license and for the ability to serve alcohol. So this is really the first time that they have a request that's required to come before the council. I think this is a one-time approval process, and there have been no issues reported, so the committee unanimously voted to approve this.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Number 2.
Similar report from Planning Licenses and Development Committee. This one deals with the Jamaican Grill, and it is a request to serve alcohol in connection with their Sidewalk Cafe. And on a vote of 4-0, the Planning Licenses and Development Committee recommends that Yahoo Jamaican Grill be granted permission to serve alcoholic beverages in connection with their Sidewalk Cafe license, subject to the customary licensing requirements of the council in compliance with the requirements of Section 461191 through 461196 of the code. And I would note that Council Greenwell has a standing conflict of interest for this property. It's 45 Main Street, and he is the property owner.
Thank you. I'm looking at Councilor Bosley for a motion. Councilor Giacomo for a second, please.
Move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Bosley, seconded by Councilor Giacomo. Councilor Bosley.
Thank you, Your Honor. So this situation is the exact same as the previous. Again, they've been operating with no issues in the community for the last couple of years under the emergency order. They're coming before us just to have this request heard before council to be folded into their cafe license, and the committee unanimously voted to move it forward.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Number 3.
I'll note one abstention.
And 1 abstain. Thank you. Number 3.
Planning Licenses and Development Committee report relative to the Keene Food Festival. It's a request to use city property. On a vote of 4-0, the Planning Licenses and Development Committee recommends the Keene Young Professionals Network be granted permission to use downtown city rights-of-way on Saturday, June 4th, with a rain date of June 5th, subject to the discretion of the applicant, to conduct a food festival conditional upon the following: the furnishing of a certificate of liability insurance in the amount of $1 million, naming the city of Keene as an additional insured, the signing of a standard revocable license and indemnification agreement, that the petitioner agrees to absorb the cost of any city services over and above the amount of city funding allocated to the event, and agrees to remit said payment within 30 days of invoicing. That the footprint and the layout for the event shall encumber the traveled portions of Central Square, Main Street, both sides from Central Square to Railroad Street and Gilboa Ave, and a portion of Railroad Street. Road closures may include any portions of other streets needed to facilitate detour routes. The full extent of road closures and detour routes shall be agreed upon with city staff. The petitioner is permitted to place porta potties in city parking spaces located at the base of Washington Street from Friday, June 3rd to Monday, June 6th, which will be chained together and affixed to ensure that they are not vandalized while unattended overnight. The actual event will be held from 11:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. with the times for setup and cleanup to be established with staff. Free parking is granted under the provisions of the free parking policy for city parking spaces on Washington Street needed for the storage of equipment from Friday, June 3rd to Monday, June 6th, and spaces within the event footprint on the day of the event. The submittal of signed letters of permission from any private property owners for the use of their property. Finally, said permission is granted, subject to obtainment of any necessary licenses and permits, compliance with all laws, and compliance with the recommendations of staff.
Thank you, Counselor Bosley for a motion. Counselor Giacomo for a second, please.
I move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Bosley, seconded by Counselor Giacomo. Counselor Bosley.
Thank you. So this is actually going to be the return of this event, which was very successful last year. The petitioner this year actually asked to expand the event, so it looks like they will be closing off a portion of Main Street down to Railroad Street and a portion of Railroad Street, potentially. The KYPN is working in tandem with the Art Walk this year as part of their process, and the committee was really excited to see this come back.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion? Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to know where it says the commissioner is permitted to place porta potties in city parking spaces. The last sentence says to ensure they are not vandalized while attended overnight. And I was wondering how can they assure that? What are they doing? That's all I want to know.
They're chaining them, I think.
They're chaining them together? Or Counselor Remy, why don't you, you're probably the
Thank
most
you.
familiar with it.
Yeah, so to answer the question, chaining them together, we actually are trying to get them dropped off and picked up same day so we don't have to deal with it. But
Right.
if that's not possible, it makes them harder to tip over if they're chained together. That's really the goal.
I just didn't want to see you be out there all night long watching.
We're not, hopefully we don't have to pay security on those stuff.
And that wasn't a challenge.
It's not a challenge, to be clear. I actually was raising my hand as well, if I can.
Yeah, Counselor Remy.
Thank you. Yeah, excited to have this back before you guys tonight. This was a really great event last year. The event is largely planned to be very similar to what it was last year. A couple learnings, the art walk, for example. Yeah, largely very, very similar to what it was last year. Still looking for sponsors, volunteers. If you have friends, family, come hang out. But hopefully we get through pass for approval tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to remind the council that this event was actually conceived out of the Keene Rebound Committee, and the Young Professionals Network stepped up, thanks to Michael, and did a great job putting it together, and we're very proud of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Further comments or discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Which brings us to number 4.
Planning License and Development Committee report relative to an amendment to the Rules of Order, specifically Section 4. It's been titled Quorum, and now it would be titled Quorum and Remote Participation. On a vote of 4-0, the Planning License and the Development Committee recommends the city attorney draft an amendment to Section 4 of the rules in accordance with the background notes of the committee's discussion.
Thank you. So both 4 and 5 here sort of are the culmination of pulling a couple of controversial things out of the rules that you all adopted previously and working those through. And so because we've gotten to that point, I'm going to request that Counselor Bosley give us a motion to suspend the rules to act on this. I think we've discussed it quite a bit, and it's time to make a decision, Council. So with that, I would ask Counselor Bosley to give us a motion, and Counselor Giacomo for a second, please.
I move to suspend the rules of order to allow action on the proposed amendment.
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Bosley, seconded by Counselor Giacomo. Counselor Bosley.
I would just like to echo what the mayor just said. I feel like the PLD committee has put a considerable amount of time into revising the language in these rules between last year and this year. And I really think we've come to consensus on a way to move forward. And I think the only way that we're going to make that decision is to put it in front of this group of people tonight and ask for your opinion. So I think we're ready.
All right, thank you. So this is a suspension of the rules vote, so we'll need a roll call. But would anyone like to discuss it first? Counselor Chadbourne.
I just want to commend the committee. I think they did a great job, and I'm really happy with what's being presented and support it.
All right, thank you. So this is a motion to suspend the rules. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Lake?
Yes.
Counselor Remy?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Giacomo?
Yes.
Counselor Filio?
Yes.
Counselor Williams?
Yes.
Counselor Jones?
Yes.
Counselor Madison?
Yes.
Counselor Roberts?
Yes.
Counselor Ormerod?
Yes.
Counselor Chadbourne?
Yes.
Counselor Workman?
Yes.
Counselor Greenwald?
Yes.
Counselor Bosley?
Yes.
Counselor Powers?
Yes.
And it's unanimous, so the rules are suspended. And now at this point, I'd ask for another motion from Counselor Bosley and a second by Counselor Giacomo, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to amend Section 4 of the Rules of Order as recommended by the Planning, Licenses, and Development Committee.
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Bosley, seconded by Counselor Giacomo. Counselor Bosley.
Thank you. I hope you all had a chance to read through the language that was presented in our packet tonight. We basically took the concept of remote participation and we found a couple of areas where we thought that it was important to specifically allow for it. Those areas were identified as health issues, disability, and out-of-town employment. We did choose, there was a lot of conversation at this committee last year about what additional items could be open for remote participation and not. And I think the committee decided to look at the language from the statute and to include the statement. We did create an additional statement that says, or otherwise permitted by the discretion of the public body, which gives the committee members that has the committee of members that has someone who's interested in having remote participation for an item that was not one of the 3 items, the opportunity to vote on it and with consensus allow remote participation. And I think that there's a couple of things, points that came up at our committee in regards to remote. I think that it gives accessibility to our council for individuals in the community who might not have thought that it was accessible by being here and, and keeping this rigorous schedule that we have. We've all had situations, whether it's road conditions or childcare or out-of-town employment or concern of risk of, COVID or exposure, where we've maybe not felt comfortable coming into this room and sitting here, but we all still have an obligation and a duty to our constituents that elected us to be here to represent them. And I think we've invested as a city in the technology to be able to sit here and do this. And there are lots of communities that have not done that, but that is something that Keene did move forward with. And I think that we have the technology and we should create some boundaries where it's useful. And I think we should make this room accessible to anyone who wants to put themselves up here and run for office.
All right, thank you. Any discussion? Counselor Workman.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to point out and highlight, I'll probably be against this still. I just want to highlight that, again, all the reasons outlined, if we're putting in the 24-hour advance notice, most of those things that were brought up as reasons to have this would not be permissible. Counselor Johnson, I understand the road conditions, but you probably wouldn't have known that 24 hours in advance. As far as single parents or parents, we have members of the council that are parents. We've had other candidates who have been able to find the time, whether they're parents or single parents or working families. Again, when I ask constituents why they don't run for office, it's usually not because of the lack of availability or lack of remote participation. It's because they don't want the public scrutiny. So again, I think we're just doing this because this current council wants it. I don't think that the reasons are because we want to get more participation or a bigger candidate pool. So I will be against this. Thank you.
Okay, Counselor Jones?
Thank you, Your Honor. I am opposed to this, but I'm not going to speak to that right now. There's three things I'd like to bring forward that are affected by this. And the first question is for the city clerk. There's an ordinance governing the councilor's pay, and it's based on attendance. If this passes, I think it should say based on attendance as part of a quorum.
Yeah.
I'm trying to recall where that provision is, whether that is in
I don't know where
the
it is.
charter. So I got a feeling that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I guess to the city attorney, so we know that because of ADA, someone with a disability, we have to provide some reasonable provisions. So someone with an ADA certified disability, they should be part of a quorum. That should be in here somewhere.
I don't understand your question, I'm sorry.
Right now, those attending remotely are not part of a quorum, correct?
They cannot form the quorum. The quorum must be, under current law, quorum must be present at the physical location. Yes.
But also, in here, in the new revision, the remote people are not part of the quorum.
They cannot be used to constitute the quorum, that's correct.
That's my point.
Right.
Now, what was my question now? People certified disabled should be counted as part of the quorum.
They can't
They
by
cannot-
state statute.
They cannot be if they are remote, that's correct. Well, talk to the legislature.
Okay, enough with that one. Okay, and the other one is, you're required to vote, right?
Yes,
You have to vote, yes or no, on every vote.
unless you are recused, that's
But
correct.
if I'm remote, and all of a sudden my remote goes dead when it's time to vote, or I accidentally hit the button, how do we approach that?
At that point, they drop out of the meeting, there is no doubt, so they don't vote.
Because it's happened to me when we were doing the COVID thing. I mean, there were times when I just would lose service, or I'd be on traveling, I'd be on the phone and lose my cell service. So you lose the rest of the meeting?
No, well, no. The meeting does not have to stop if for some reason the remote participant has to drop out of the meeting or there's a technological glitch or anything like that. That person it's just like you got up from here and walked out the door. So you would be out of the meeting at that point.
You're out of the meeting, but you're required to vote.
Under our rules of procedure, you would be required to vote. What you are suggesting, Counselor, I think, is a vote comes up and I don't want to vote on it, and I go, I had a glitch, I dropped
Exactly.
out. Yeah,
Exactly.
that is certainly a possibility. There is no doubt.
Can we put language in there?
Well, I would just say that technically, you could do the same thing if you were in the room. If you wanted to walk out on a vote, actually in the rules, we made it so that you didn't have to ask permission to walk out of the room. We did that a couple revisions ago, so that opportunity exists whether it's remote or in person.
Those are my questions, Your Honor. I'll speak later.
Okay, thank you. I saw Counselor Roberts had his hand up before, and then Counselor Workman.
Thank you, Your Honor. This one is kind of a tough one because I'm listening to the language and I'm listening to reading the language and listening to what some people have said. Some people who know me know I have extremely serious disabilities, and it takes me a lot of effort to get dressed and come out and be presented. And when I go home tonight, I'll be wiped out. But I came and I got elected, and I'm here to represent the people. But right now, kind of way I'm looking at it, you would say, hey, because Councilor Roberts, you can only use your hand and your foot on your right side, and it could be dangerous. You can be elected for 4 years and never have to show up because I've got all the disability things, and so for some of the people who don't know, and I still appreciate Councilman Powell and Councilor Greenwald, who came to my house and shoveled the snow and everything for my wife when I was stuck in the nursing home for months. So one, you got to be really careful on the wording because I kind of take it as a little insulting because you're saying we're doing it for you. When I'm coming, I get elected, I'm making the effort to be here. Don't give me an out or anybody else with disability saying, hey, you're disabled, you don't have to show up, just Zoom it in.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Workman.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have, can Raleigh go first?
Go ahead.
I called on you, so go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I was just gonna kind of piggyback on Counselor Roberts' sentiment. I also had a question for our attorney. I think before in deliberations, you had mentioned that regardless of whether or not we have this in our rules of order, we still have to follow the ADA and offer a reasonable accommodation to someone with a disability if they request one, correct?
Right now, my understanding of the current state of the law is that would be correct. I will tell you that there is a case presently pending before the First Circuit Court of Appeal that came out of the New Hampshire House of Representatives during the height of the COVID matter. There was an action filed against the Speaker of the House because the House had adopted a rule that basically prohibited remote participation. Some members of the House of Representatives sued, claiming under the ADA and the Americans in the Rehabilitation Act, some other provisions, but those were the two important ones, that was a discriminatory matter. The district court, the federal district court in Concord, sort of avoided the question of the disability aspect of the rule and essentially said that the House of Representatives as a co-equal branch of government has the right to make its own rules. That's a non-justiciable question before this court, so they dismissed the request for injunctive relief. It went up to the First Circuit. A three-member panel of the First Circuit reversed the district court's decision and distinguished a major case that the district court had used for that proposition and said, well, that case didn't come up in the context of a disability. Here we have a claim of disability, and the district court basically reached a different conclusion than the appeals court reached a different conclusion. After that, the House of Representatives requested that the full Circuit Court of Appeal, it's called an en banc decision, rule on the matter. They have not done that yet. I did talk to counsel with respect to one of the participants in this, and there has been no decision coming down yet. long way of explaining that that decision is sort of floating out there at the moment. However, I have to tell you that it comes up in the context of the state legislature and the state courts. And we are, this body, no matter how august we are not the New Hampshire House of Representatives. So I can't tell you that even if that case comes down and says that the House of Representatives does not have to provide that accommodation, I can't tell you that that would apply to this body, okay? That's a long way of saying that the risk is still there, and being somebody who likes to be risk averse when I need to be, I would have to tell you that I would not like to be in a position where you would not allow that opportunity to somebody who does meet the qualifications under the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Rehabilitation Act. And I would rather it be, if you're not, I'd rather it be silent than you take an action that says no. So.
Thank you.
Counselor Ormerod.
Thank you. When I considered this, I had to look at the world we live in now, and the world of many organizations are making decisions that impact our life remotely. They're operating remotely. And we have proven that we can do this, not just for during COVID, but many different companies, many businesses that I'm involved with, many committees and boards that I serve on. For instance, we launched a product that has sold $1 million in the first month, all working remotely. So I know that we can be very effective operating in this way. I asked for clarification on the exact procedure, and I think we got that. In case you weren't aware exactly how this would happen, it is still up to the discretion of the body that's meeting to accept the person as a participating in the meeting or not to. And usually it's done by consensus. If there's not a consensus, the chair can still make that decision, and the chair can be overruled if it's very clear that the person has abused the privilege, they're not participating, they're ducking in and out, or whatever that behavior is. We have written into the rules of the procedure to control those things for misbehavior. So I hope you can consider that in your decision, and I am supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Further discussion? Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Your Honor. This was an interesting conversation, and I've given it a lot of thought on both sides. I thoroughly understand. I've heard Councilor Filio talk about this is what they set up back in 18 whatever, and if it worked then, it should work now. But I think we've become much more sophisticated since then. We're not just a group of very dedicated men who have gotten together and got to these meetings. We're a mixture of people when we're hoping for all kinds of inclusivity. The case in point was the other evening. My chair was considerate enough for this meeting to come and get me because we had this huge snowstorm. And I had 2 meetings that day. I had the Heritage Committee and I had the PLD. I called up the Heritage Committee person. I said, hey, can I get on Zoom so I can at least hear what's happening? Because I was very involved with what was doing. They had it on in a heartbeat. It was great. I was not voting, but I was able to call in. When I wanted to ask for this, it wasn't okay. And my chair was very considerate. On a horrendous night to be out driving, she came and picked me up. So I personally, I understand where folks are coming from, but there are circumstances in human beings' lives that come into play. And some of us are so dedicated to the process. This is not going to sound very clear, but we don't want to miss. And just because we're home due to a bad snowstorm doesn't mean we don't care about what's going on. So maybe if I can't vote, at least it keeps the path rolling. So that's where I'm coming from, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councilor Mosley?
I would just like to speak to Councilor Roberts' points. One of the things that I do think is probably the most important 7 words in that statement of quorum and remote participation is Remote participation by members is discouraged. None of us want to see it happen, but we all have moments in our lives where there are extenuating circumstances. We did hear that at the committee that, this worked in 1880 something, and why can't it work today? Well, today we have members of this board who travel for work. We have members of this board who have children. The last 2 meetings that I've attended, the Joint Committee meeting and the PLD meeting, my daughter sat in the audience because I did not have childcare. Did I think that it was a priority for me to be here? Yes. Is she fine doing that? Yes. I actually like that she has to come and observe and see what we do. But is there going to come a day where I might not be able to keep all the balls in the air? Absolutely. Do I think my opinion here is valuable, and would I maybe make a different decision if I knew that I wasn't able to, be a good parent and be a good counselor? I would choose to not be a counselor because my family has to come first. So I think, creating an environment where we all know that being here in this room is the most effective way of getting through the material on our agenda as a group. We learned that during COVID. We learned that being in a Zoom meeting, it was laborious. We had probably had less verbal participation than we do when we're in the room. We all want to be here. This is only when you have extenuating circumstances, and I go back to those statement of it's discouraged. So I think let's just keep the door open.
All right. This is a 2/3 vote, and it'll have to be by roll call, but Councilor Filio?
May I rise in opposition to this as I have in the past?
Microphone.
Thank you very much. I guess I go into the if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's not. I realize we have new technology, but just because you have new technology doesn't mean that it's better than what we've been doing. I think we saw during Zoom meetings during the pandemic that it didn't work well at all. It worked. We made it through, but I don't think it was effective at all. Alluding to what Councilor Johnson just said about road conditions, it wouldn't matter unless you knew 24 hours ahead what the road condition was going to be anyhow. If that day it was snowing out and you couldn't make it, Councilor Johnson, you call me and I'll give you a ride. Not a problem whatsoever. Anybody can call me and I'll give you a ride. If somebody's afraid of driving, I don't think that's going to be a problem. One of us will get you here. I think just even some of the questions that were brought up tonight, we're opening up a can of worms. And I don't even think we know half of them that we're going to bring up. As far as trying to make city council just convenient for everybody, that's just never going to happen. There's going to be nights we're going to be sick. There's going to be nights that you might be out of town or you're on vacation. That's why going way back when, that's why it's a 15-member council. A council will survive without one of us being here. A council will survive without 2 of us being here. There's been council survived without 5 of us being here. It'll still work. It was made and designed to work. Yeah, they designed it a long time ago, but they've done a good job. As far as the pandemic, if there's a state has a state emergency again, well, then we go back to Zoom. We have to go back to Zoom. God forbid we ever have to do that. Because I don't want to do that. A couple of comments as far as people not running for office. Councilor Workman's right. It's not because you have to be here 2 nights a month. And then again, once again, if you can't commit to 2 nights a month, don't run for city council. Just don't run. Say, you know what? I can't do this. If we're going to accommodate everybody, obviously somebody that works second shift in Keene, say 3 to 11, they can't make it. Are we going to accommodate a second shift amendment because you can't make it? We want everybody that works second shift to make it. Everybody's not going to be able to run for city council. There's going to be conflicts. There's going to be families. There's going to be work requirements. There's going to be health. Not everybody's going to be able to run for city council. But the way the system is right now, it works. And I think, once again, we just opened up a whole can of worms, the whole 24-hour thing. Obviously the weather thing doesn't work. And Councilor Roberts, kudos to you, because I think people should be making the effort to show up to city council. I think that's why we're elected. I think you talk to your constituents and you go out and ask them, do you think we should stay home for a council meeting or, not show up? It's going to be overwhelming. We elected you to show up. And even in the way that it's written, it says, we're going to discourage remote participation. But what does that say? It's saying that we don't really like it anyhow, but we'll kind of sort of do this. So I adamantly oppose to this. And once again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're going to run for city council, you're going to have to tell yourself, I have to commit to 2 nights a month. That's it. Thank you.
All right, Counselor Giacomo, then Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, I'm not sure which committee Councilor Filio is on, that it meets twice a month. This is at least 4 to 5 nights a month minimum, and that's not even including the other ad hoc committees and things like that you might be on. But the bigger thing is, I do agree with Councilor Filio in a lot of what he's saying here. It is not as good. It is absolutely not as good, but it does work, and we've proven it works. And so what we're not saying, hey, we should switch all of council to Zoom permanently. What we're saying here is we want to give people an opportunity to participate. Every opportunity we can give to elected officials to do their job, we should give them that opportunity. If we're missing 2 counselors and they're both from Ward 4, whatever, Ward 3, you don't have any representation from that ward now voting. If we're voting on something that actually matters specifically to one area and you have no representation for the constituents of that ward, obviously we have at large, but you're missing representation of the 2 people who solely represent that ward there. We were all voted into this office to participate. We were voted in because they believe that we have something important to say here and that our voices do matter. Our voices are not just, they don't just go away when there's 13 other people. That's not how this is supposed to work. And if we can give that voice an opportunity to be heard through the use of technology that we have today, I don't know why we wouldn't. This is enabling legislation. This is not changing things in a negative direction. This is enabling alternate solutions to allow participation, whether or not it's any of these reasons, whether or not it's due to disabilities or childcare, whatever. We're enabling this. We don't want it to be the first option, and it should never be the first option. Completely agree. This is an inferior way of participation, but it is effective. We've proven it, and I think we should consider it as an option and putting that into law.
All right, thank you. Further comments? Counselor Lake? Oh, sorry, Counselor Lake. I had Counselor Jones queued up, but Counselor Lake, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Counselor Jones. I just want to voice my support for this. I think it makes sense for us to use the technology that's available to us in circumstances that are out of our control. I voiced that previously, that as long as it's a narrow enough set of circumstances, I think it makes sense for us to allow it. And I think this is narrow enough that it won't be used very often, and it won't cause us to be less efficient. I think this is going to increase participation, even if it's just a little bit, and I think we should support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Jones?
Thank you. Something I thought Randy was going to talk about was how this can open up to abuse, and the potential is there. Everybody says, "Oh, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen." Just ask the clerk's office how many times people have tried to run for council and used the wrong address. How many times have people tried to run for council and used the wrong name? There's even one person that legally changed their name to run for mayor. Those things happen. There's extremists that want to take advantage of every little thing they can that happens out here. We've become a very divisive society. And with that, people with extreme visions are looking to get more and more involved just to get their plight out in front of the people. And instead of, because they're not community minded, they just want to work on their own visions. And this is creating an opportunity. You can remotely attend all these meetings and never have to face the people. I mean, I could attend meetings all summer from a camp in Maine and Florida in the winter if I just have a good excuse 24 hours in advance. And I think we want to avoid those kinds of abuses, and we want to avoid extremism being much more vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Counselor Lake?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to address this issue of potential abuse. From my reading, at least, of this, it seems as though we have some provisions here to combat that. But if someone is openly abusing it, we can shut that down and we can stop it by discretion of the body. So if someone is abusing this, it will stop. We will stop it unless the entire council allows for it to happen. Thank you.
All right. Counselor Roberts?
Yes, Your Honor. Since some of the counselors have been talking about abuse and stopping the abuse, so one counselor can't find the babysitter, so she brings a babysitter. She brings her daughter here. So someday she won't be able to bring her daughter, and then she has to go on phone. Would we call that abuse? Some may not. Some people may have an injury. I have a sore ankle. Is that abuse? Some will and some not. So when we're talking about abuse, there is no definition of abuse. As one counsel said, it's open to discretion of the body. And so another counsel said, we're pretty decisive. And so one of the things that we're here for is to do the business of the council, not run into the possibility of deciding who is may be abusing it, and that definition of abuse may be based on 14 other different people's abuse. So my daughters work, they got grandkids, and I would say yes. Not having a babysitter is extremely important and can stop everything what's going on. You may not even be able to go to work if you have a sick child and don't have that. And so we don't have a definitive answer what abuse is. And I don't think we as a city council then should be getting in the future and deciding if someone possibly abuse something, but we don't know what is.
All right, thank you. All set for a vote. It's going to require roll call, 2/3. So will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Lake?
Yes.
Counselor Remy?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Giacomo?
Yes.
Counselor Filio?
No.
Counselor Williams?
Yes.
Counselor Jones?
No.
Counselor Madison?
Yes.
Yep. Counselor Roberts?
No.
Counselor Ormerod?
Yes.
Counselor Chadbourne?
Yes.
Counselor Workman?
No.
Counselor Greenwald?
Yes.
Counselor Bosley?
Yes.
Counselor Powers?
Yes.
So I think it passes.
Yep.
All good?
11 in favor, 4 opposed.
11 in favor, 4 opposed. Thank you very much. Which brings us to another rules of order, issue number 5.
Planning Licenses and Development Committee report relative to an amendment to the Rules of Order, this one dealing with Section 15, Conflict of Interest. On a vote of 4-0, the Planning Licenses and Development Committee recommends the city attorney draft an amendment to Section 15 of the rules in accordance with the background notes of the committee's discussion.
Thank you very much. So same deal, we'll have to suspend the rules again. I'm looking at Counselor Bosley for a motion. Counselor Giacomo for a second, please.
I move to suspend the rules of order to allow action on the proposed amendment.
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Bosley, seconded by Counselor Giacomo. Any discussion on the suspension? Same deal?
Same deal.
All right. Already, any more discussion on the suspension of the rules? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Lake?
Yes.
Counselor Remy?
Yes.
Counselor Giacomo?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Counselor Johnson. Sorry, dear.
It's all right.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Counselor Giacomo?
Still yes.
And Counselor Filio?
Yes.
And Counselor Williams?
Yes.
Counselor Jones?
Yes.
Counselor Madison?
Yes.
Counselor Roberts?
Yes.
Counselor Ormerod?
Yes.
Counselor Chadbourne?
Yes.
Counselor Workman?
Yes.
Counselor Greenwald?
Yes.
Counselor Bosley?
Yes.
And Counselor Powers.
And
Yes.
the rules are suspended unanimously. Thank you very much. And so now I'm looking for another motion from Counselor Bosley and a second by Counselor Giacomo, please.
I move to amend Section 15 of the Rules of Order to recommend, as recommended by the Planning Licenses and Development Committee.
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Bosley, seconded by Counselor Giacomo. Counselor Bosley.
Thank you, Your Honor. So this item was the last sort of section of the Rules of Order that we had left out, that PLD had reviewed last year, and we wanted to bring up separately so that it could stand on its own merits. This was basically, the intent here was to clarify some of the language in regards to fiduciary versus pecuniary and personal interests. We kept the majority of the language that we had seen last year, and the committee agreed that it was important to identify personal interests and pecuniary conflicts relating to counselors, boards, and commission seats. We had that it was important to consider that when considering whether a counselor had a conflict. We did agree that that position needed to be in a leadership capacity. It wasn't just, the members of the Snow Riders who might have a conflict of interest. I stole it from you.
It was in the snow.
But you do have to sit in some sort of executive seat on that board or commission in order to have that be read as a conflict. We did have a lot of discussion, though, in regards to, there was a section in the original language that also accounted for family members' pecuniary and personal interests, and we reduced that in this amended version to just family members' pecuniary interests. So a personal interest of a family member, an immediate family member, would not necessarily constitute a conflict for a counselor. So you do see that that language is changed in the beginning of the proposed amendment. However, in the amendment that was in your packet, I believe it's in the last paragraph, where we had an additional statement that the mayors and council shall file with the city clerk each January a statement of interest form. On that statement of interest form, the intention is for the counselor to identify their source of employment and any boards and commissions that they sit on once a year. And it, in this statement, also reads that that should be done for their immediate family as well. I would like to propose an amendment that we strike that second sentence, and that it should be written, the statement of interest shall identify for each counselor and for each person in the household, for each person in the immediate family, the person's employer, and shall state for each counselor any board, commission, organization, association, or other entity with which the person is a member of, and whether or not the person holds a leadership position in that organization. So that we're clearly not asking counselors to identify boards and commissions of their immediate family.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Bosley, seconded by Counselor Giacomo, to amend the language that's in front of you in the way that Counselor Bosley indicated. Any discussion on that? Counselor Giacomo?
Yeah, but just to be clear, this was the original intent of the PLD's discussion, as Councilor Bosley alluded to. If you look through the meeting notes from this was what we had discussed, and it is actually what we had voted on in the meeting.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Not required.
Not required.
Not an amendment.
Okay. All right, I remember that now. Kind of interesting that you can amend it with a simple majority, but anyway, for another day and another discussion. Further discussion. Seeing none. Are you ready for Counselor Roberts?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like to know why the word household was stricken out and replaced by immediate family, because more and more households in the United States are not married couples, and so I could have a much closer interest with my partner who is not part of my immediate family but my household. So if my partner and I don't have children, quote unquote, we don't have any immediate family. So if I have a partner, I don't have to say anything about my partner, what the partner does or anything, but as soon as I marry that person, I have to do that. And so when you look at a lot of people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, their idea of marriage is going downhill and going downhill fast for a whole bunch of reasons. So I think we're really limited to us old fogies who are still married when you say immediate household, where the younger people who may not be married but still have children and everything, they don't have to do it. So I think you really have to be careful when you're saying only immediate family.
City Attorney?
Yeah, it goes back to it goes back to the defined term up in the first paragraph of immediate family, which is the spouse, the parent, the child, or other member of the counselor's sort of immediate family. That's people in the household that you may not be related to. It could be your partner, it could be your partner's children, it could be your mother, it could be your father in that context. So it goes back up to, that was the point of having to do that. It's a defined term, which is why it was dropped down into the last paragraph as the same defined term.
All set, Counselor Roberts?
Well, I still have, I think when you say immediate family, without question, I know who the immediate family is. But when the part up top, yeah, it could be your mother, may not, or me a partner. I think that's leaving a lot to me to make the determination instead of the ordinance making the determination.
Okay. Counselor Giacomo?
Thank you. This actually, what Councilor Roberts is speaking to actually ties in somewhat with the amendment that was just made as well. And that was part of the reason why specifically we're looking for a pecuniary interest for family members. If it's something that you're interested in, we went over some of the absurd examples of that where you've got a child who really likes fire trucks. Well, the fire department, clearly you should be able to vote on them still.
Yeah.
So the idea was we want to make sure it's actually just a pecuniary interest of the family because if usually there is a financial tie to someone in your household, that's suddenly where you actually have a bigger interest in the same things that they do because you're tied financially. That was the idea behind it, not necessarily that you are tied financially, but that was why that amendment was put into place to kind of address some of that.
Counselor Filio?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I have a problem with the amendment, and it has nothing to do with the wording of it. The wording of it's probably fine. Whenever we suspend the rules of order, and I know Councilor Greenwell, Councilor Jones remember this from going back, we used to be very strict on suspending the rules of order. It really had to be something that got missed and had to go through right now, and we didn't have time. With the quorum part of it, I was going to vote no, but I let it go, and so be it. In this part, I might have let go also, even though I have a really problem when we suspend the rules of order, when I don't think we really need to suspend the rules of order. But when we suspend the rules of order, and now we're doing an amendment as we suspend the rules of order, and we're going to try to push it through. So we've suspended the rules of order, and now we're going to do an amendment on the fly. I'm opposed to that. I realize PLD has been all over this for a long time, but if we have an amendment, if we just suspended the rules because we want to push this through, and now we bring an amendment to the floor as we're suspending the rules of order, I'd rather have it go back to committee and do it right, rather than doing this on the fly. So the wording might be absolutely perfect, I 100% agree with it, but suspending the rules, there's a reason for that, and if we're amending it on the fly, I'm opposed to that. And that's why I stand opposed to the amendment.
Okay. Counselor Jones?
I want to ask a question, Your Honor. So we're supposed to file this document stating what our places of work and so on. Is this a public document?
Yes.
Because it opens it up to issues too. When I was on council in New Jersey, we were required to do this, and it was a public document under the Russell Law down there, and it once again, there was abuses. There was extremists calling my place of work and telling people that the guy that works there is no good. He's not the guy you want. They make up stories about you, and this could happen here now. And I've seen it happen, and it scares me that it could happen again, that we're at least making this information public. Especially letting them know where your spouse works, and I don't think that's totally necessary at all. For years, we've dealt with conflict of interest. If somebody felt they had a conflict because their spouse had pecuniary interest, they would just state it, and that was it. Same, or if they felt they were impartial. I remember Brian one time telling us he was impartial, he was felt biased. So we allowed him, also Mitch, there's times when he said, I have a bias. I think we should stick with that. It's worked well for years, and not start getting into details about filing documents and so on.
Okay. Councilor Lake.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm sympathetic to the idea that we shouldn't be amending things while we have the rules of order suspended, but I believe this amendment is to actually get that form to function as anticipated, if I'm not right. Maybe I can get some clarification from the city attorney, but I believe the way it's written is that you wouldn't have to actually fill this out for yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me be clear, and Councilor Bosley, due to her very good reading and memory of this, because when I drafted this, I drafted this version of it after the PLD meeting and captured, as was said, the distinction between a personal interest and a pecuniary interest when it comes to the counselor or the counselor's immediate family. I failed, unfortunately, to carry that intent over into this last paragraph. So the intention of the last paragraph was to keep the same structure so that for the counselor and for each member, for the counselor and each member, you have to state whether there's any any pecuniary interest. But only the counselor has to identify what boards or commissions that they may sit on. So we split it out. That was the intention. That's the intention of the amendment, which is basically just to conform to what the committee had done in the first place, and which is what occurred in the first paragraph. That was the only intention of this amendment. What you're talking about now are matters that had been discussed further, which is earlier, which was the form itself, whether or not to have this form, whether or not to put it into the city clerk on an annual basis. That was carried over from basically from the rule that was considered but not adopted last year at this point.
Councilor Madison.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just have a quick question for the city attorney. Would campaign contributions to a city councilor, whether cash or in-kind services, be considered a pecuniary interest that councilor would then have to disclose?
Under the definition of a pecuniary interest, yes, probably. Because the language is any basically financial interest that you get that other members of the public do not enjoy at that point. So the answer to that question would be yes, especially if it affected your interest as a counselor.
Thank you.
All right. Councilor Greenwald.
Thank you. I just want to sit still, but you just stepped on something.
Let's be clear, I didn't step on that.
In no way do I see that this should be getting into identifying campaign contributions and sources of where they came from. That, I don't think, was at all the meaning of what's going on with this conflict of interest.
Again, the question becomes, if you have to read the language, is it a financial consideration or an economic gain to the counselor which is not otherwise available to the public generally? That's why I said, in general, if the campaign contribution is there to affect your decision-making as a member of the council, which it's not supposed to be, but we understand that that sometimes happens, then I think potentially they would have to report that. But if you're just getting a campaign contribution because you're running your campaign, that's a different story.
I just want to stir it a little bit more based on the amount of conversation that went on, going back to when Councilor Clark was raising the issue. It really is a deep hole, and I'm going to kind of repeat something that Councilor Filio said. We had a good system that's worked for a long, long time, and it just was focused on pecuniary interest. So this is like an amazing amount of disclosure. Fine, disclosure. I don't think that there's any great mystery where someone's spouse works, and, or where you work or what club you belong to. And we're still a small town here. Goodness, I don't know. I think we're getting a little bit too deep in the weeds. It comes down to personal integrity, and when something doesn't feel right, or the expression, the red face test, or the icky feeling, that's when there's a conflict of interest. And any one of us can call any any of us, on a conflict of interest when it occurs. But I really don't think it's a problem. So if this disclosure makes everyone feel good, fine, disclose. I'll start writing.
You'll start what?
Writing.
Counselor Madison, I saw him first.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess I'll just respond to Counselor Greenwald. Historically, it hasn't been an issue for counselors receiving campaign contributions. That has changed in recent years. I guess my only response to that is why hide where you are getting campaign money? If it's not if it's something you feel needs to be hidden from the public, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. As far as people knowing where, the public knowing where you work, the public knows where I work. The public can look up my salary. Same with Councilor Workman. We work for the state of New Hampshire. Like, all my employment information is already public. So if some of you are worried about that, I'm living it. I can tell you what it's like. Thank you.
Counselor Filio.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, I rest my case here. This is why we don't suspend the rules and do things on the fly. I mean, we've already asked 3 questions of the city attorney. We were asking the mayor. I mean, we're bringing up all types of questions. This is why we don't suspend the rules. This is why things go back to committee. And that's why I'm moving right now that we send this back to committee.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Motion to send is not debatable.
Not debatable. All right, so you all set on the motion to send it back to committee? Ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? All right. 3 opposed.
Sorry, Kate.
So we'll go back to committee. Yeah. Counselor Bosley.
Okay, I can turn my back. Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to say, one counselor showed up at our PLD meeting last week. So Counselor Phil gets the gold star. I'm sorry, Counselor Remy did also. He had an item on our agenda. But I know how many of your faces that I normally see at our committee meetings, which is exactly why this is happening. It's not happening on the floor tonight because nothing would have changed because none of you would have come to the PLD meeting next month. So I challenge all of you to come and have this real discussion with us at PLD. Let's work this out because I don't want to be back here 3 more times this year.
Thank you very much. Well, we're sending it on. I got to move on to the agenda. You'll have a chance to weigh in at PLD. Brings us to number 6.
Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee report relative to the acceptance of a 2022 wellness grant. On a vote of 5-0, the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee recommends the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to accept the wellness grant from Health Trust to be used for employee wellness activities in 2022.
And I'm looking for a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Remy, please.
I thank you, Your Honor. I would move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Remy. Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Finance Committee was met with 16 other folks, so get ready. We got to run here on items to talk about. We had the first item was from the Human Resources Director, and this is kind of an annual event. Our health insurance provider, Health Trust, has provided us with a grant of money for the employee wellness activities in 2022. And we voted unanimously to accept this and authorize the use of the funds for this program. Well used and well done by the HR department and the rest of the employees of the city. We hope the council will do the same.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Number 7.
Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee report relative to the acceptance of the Locality Equipment Matching Program grant. This is on behalf of the Fire Department. On a vote of 5-0, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommends the City Council authorize the city manager to do all things necessary to accept and expend the Gopher Locality Equipment Matching Program grant.
Thank you. Council Powers for motion, Council Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second.
We have a motion from Council Powers, seconded by Council Remy. Council Powers.
This item is to authorize the city manager to accept and expend the funds that we received. And this was a grant that was applied for through the various Gopher, or it's a result of COVID period of time for the last 2 years that we put a lot of time against and a lot of equipment. We were awarded $49,342, and the city has matching money within the budget, $5,482, to make up the difference so that they can continue to purchase the equipment they're going to use and then provide the services. As a example, there's a mechanical compression device for CPR. There's also 2 Lucas devices, which is part of the program in the fire department, basically used in ambulances. It will also allow them to take some of the AED machines that are currently within the system, be replaced with newer ones, and those are still viable pieces of equipment. Can they be put on other equipment to be able to respond within the city? So this was a quick turnaround, as I understand it. When the grant application came out, we were able to put together the request, go forward to Concord, and approved in a very short period of time. Excellent job here. We recommend that the council approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Number 8.
Finance Organization and Personnel Committee report relative to a negotiation of a lease at the airport property. On a vote of 5-0, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommends the city manager or her designee be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a lease agreement with Kevin Provost for land associated with a privately owned hangar.
I'm looking to Council Powers for motion. Council Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second.
We have a motion from Council Powers, seconded by Council Remy. Council Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Finance Committee was joined by the airport director, and he indicates to us that he is seeking the authorization for a